Bruins Beat is brought to you by the Game Time app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Game Time. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. What a weekend of sports. It sounds cliche to say, but like Friday, even Friday, but like Saturday and Sunday, just all day hockey, which is awesome. Although the TNT broadcast, what's going on with that? They're not sending people in person to Canadian games.
Dude, it's
and
like
then they lost the Montreal game on Sunday night. It was
just misplaced it. Couldn't find it. No, it was. It's like you look at the difference between those broadcasts. It's like ASMR for the U.S. broadcast. It's terrible, and it sucks too because like I used to like beyond when like even as a fan watching it. And clearly it's not the same now, but like, remember how much of a spectacle it would be when it's like, you would watch old highlights. I still do, of like Doc Emmerich calling games, and like Doc's calls were obviously elite, but also like the crowd felt like it was so hyped up too. Like even like, you look at like 2011, the Stanley Cup finals, like Doc's calls plus how good the sound was. Like it's unbelievable. So yeah, it's already like a disservice of not having people on site. And it's like, if you're going to pay that much for the broadcasting rights, like, send you people up to fucking Vancouver or Edmonton. Like, I don't get that. But also, yeah, like the sound mix is, and that's something that I feel like, wasn't it last year too, where I think TNT had like a much better audio mix than ESPN. Wasn't ESPN the one that was like super quiet?
I think
like,
people were like, is the Garden loud? Like, it doesn't sound loud tonight. And we were like,
yes.
it very much is. It's just the sound quality's bad.
Yeah, it was something like that. I remember it was definitely last year. People were like, wow, like the Garden's dead quiet. What the hell's going on there? I'm like, it's pretty bumping in here, guys. Like, this isn't like, I know there's the usual discourse about, like the playoffs are here and all the passionate fans get bumped out. Now, it was bumping. It's been bumping the last couple of years. It isn't broadcast probably through, if you watch it on TV, which sucks because, again, like, one, not everyone can go to playoff games because tickets are ungodly expensive. Like, you still want to get that excitement that comes into watching playoff hockey. There's nothing better. And so to not have that, it takes away from the experience. Like, even if these like playoff games in this round are at least getting a little bit more interesting, there's a couple of 2-2 series now, when it looked for a while like there was going to be like multiple sweeps. Like the spectacle isn't really there. And it's, I think, in part because of the broadcasting, and it's more importantly the mix. Like, you can't get swept up into it beyond just the actual play, which is the main point of it, of course, but it does feel like there is something missing.
It doesn't feel the same at all. It just doesn't. And I don't know if it's because we're older or what. But I think it's legit because everyone's complaining about it. And it does. I mean, again, it sounds like I'm listening to a game, watching a game in a library. And I wonder how the NHL feels about that. Like TNT not sending their people in person, especially to Canadian games. Maybe TNT feels like, oh, this isn't going to do well with ratings, so why spend the money? But then why have the rights? I don't think in any sport outside of COVID, I've seen a network not send play-by-play people to playoff games. Ever. In any sport, I don't think I've ever seen it. Like, they're always there. And so it's not the same. And TNT does a great job. They have the best in-studio show with Biz and Anson Carter, and they do a great job with that, but it's just a disappointing product. And it sucks for the fans. It sucks for all of us who want to watch those games and feel it and see it. And when you hear the difference between like the broadcast in Edmonton on Sportsnet versus on TNT, it's just night and day. So I don't know. It's unfortunate. I hope that through the next couple rounds they go in person. I would assume they do. But I haven't seen or heard a credible reason why they don't have people in person at games. I have not heard or seen anything so far. So I don't know. Just disappointing. Something to follow as the playoffs go along. But the games have been great. It's been great games. There's a lot going on, obviously. But something big happened that could have ramifications for the Bruins. On Monday morning, the Pittsburgh Penguins announced that they and longtime head coach Mike Sullivan are parting ways. And Mike Sullivan, Marshfield guy, was the head coach here from 03 to 06. Someone that BU guy, BC High guy, Charlie McAvoy's father-in-law. There's another one there.
I almost wrote son-in-law today, so I keep on getting it. I know.
It takes me a second.
I clearly know what it is, guys. Don't make fun of me. There's like that one split second where you always mess those things up.
You're like, wait, what? What are they again?
Yeah.
But a name that's been tossed around since the Bruins have had this head coaching search going, someone I think a dream candidate for a lot of people. He checks almost all the boxes. He's also only 57. And that's young for head coaches. I mean, look, I think there's reasons that it probably might not happen. The New York Rangers being chief among them. But if you can get him, if you can find a way to make that work, I don't know if you can beat that, at least in terms of knowing what you're getting, right? If you hire, we've talked about this, go find the next Spencer Carberry, there's risk there. Mike Sullivan, I don't think there's huge risk involved if you did get him.
Yeah, I almost think that it's like there's a couple different like tiers you're looking at, right? And so like there's like the internal candidates, right? Like if you're either retaining Sacco, if you're looking at Jay Leach, Ryan Mougenel, that's an option. I'm not sure if that's going to be the option they take, but that's one kind of pool of coaching candidates. There's, again, the young, up-and-coming, maybe unproven Spencer Carberry type coaches that we've talked about, right? The Don Scovs, the Marco Sturms, all those kinds of guys, which I think is probably still my priority, even if that probably is the most risk. I think having someone like a coach like that, David Carl, someone like that who's younger, who can kind of grow and evolve with a younger team and a really fresh perspective. I do really like that. And then I think it's the tier of established NHL coaches. I wouldn't say maybe retreads, but there's a lot of guys that maybe do fit that category, right? Laviolette, Gallant, Tortorella. And if you're looking at those guys, I don't think any of them really move the needle for me, right? Of like, we kind of know what to expect. Maybe get a 1 year bump and then it flames out. I think Mike Sullivan is in a different group amongst that set, right? Where he's been at one spot for 10 years. He's obviously won 2 cups. I know the results haven't been there recently, but I also look at the way that roster has eroded and their lack of ability to kind of retrofit that roster on the fly. Like, not completely absolving him, right? But I think he's a guy that has done a lot with that team. Obviously, he's viewed in high regard by NHL coaching circles. He was the head coach of Team USA at 4 Nations. So I think if you're looking at an established guy, he is far and away the leader in the pack in terms of he kind of, builds a roster or he has a roster that he stamps his own identity of how he wants them to play. The results have been there. And so, yeah, if that is the option you take in the Bruins and you're looking for someone that is a known commodity, you know what you're getting, he does make a lot of sense. Beyond the fact that his credentials are what they are, there's the obvious ties, as you said, and we know the Bruins will prioritize and like having those guys that have ties, and he has multiple, both on the current roster, history with the team, played 1 season with the Bruins with Don Sweeney, wasn't let go as part of the Sweeney regime, so it makes a lot of sense, I guess, is how you want to put it. It just depends on what the Bruins are looking for with that head coaching spot. And I think probably more importantly, what some of these other teams are looking at, because he is going to be probably the top coaching candidate on the market right now.
And there's some good jobs out there. There's some big markets in Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, who are looking for new head coaches, potentially even Vancouver. There are a lot of ties, as you mentioned. I want to kind of focus on the other side of it, of why this might not work. Because I think a lot of people are talking about all the ties and how it fits, and that makes sense. And as I said, he makes a lot of sense. But there's the other end of it too. When was the last head coach, especially in the NHL, you saw that lasted really long in one place and went elsewhere and did the exact same thing? It's hard to do. It is really hard, especially in the NHL. And this isn't a super stable situation either. It used to be. And I think right now, given the roster, given Don Sweeney's future, which we'll get into in a bit, is this the most stable situation? Now, I mean, I think it's, career fulfilling. He grew up, rooting for the Bruins. He coached here a long time ago. It's kind of like writing that because he was a much young. He was like, what, 38?
36, I think.
36. So again, when he was first head coach here, but I just, that's one thing I can't get over, where it's like, you're getting him, but are you getting him maybe when he not past his prime, but it's hard to duplicate what he did in Pittsburgh here. And ideally, you need a head coach who you can bring in, who you hope is here for 4+ years. You hope, as you said, can grow with this roster. I'm not saying he can't. I think he absolutely can. It's just hard to do that all over again. And that's not a Mike Sullivan thing. That's just a percentage in the NHL thing. Most head coaches don't last that long. I mean, now the longest tenured head coach in the NHL, it's like John Cooper, and then what, Jared Bednar, and then like nobody else really now. I mean, that's the one scary thing where it's like, I do think Sullivan would work here. I'm not saying he wouldn't, but there is always that thing of like, well, percentage wise, what are the chances he lasts here, given he was just in the same spot for 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's almost like you look at, and we say, as they're looking at, assistant coaches and unproven guys, we look at the best case scenario. It's like, all right, we hope that if they go that route, they're looking for the next Spencer Carberry, who you hope maybe ends up being the next John Cooper, right? That is the best case scenario, right? Someone like that who was unproven, who stepped into a role and ran with it. And you could do the same thing if you're looking at Mike Sullivan. Yeah, you run the risk of it. Maybe it's just a 2-3 year retread and he can't move the needle. Sure, but also you're probably looking at what's the best case scenario. Is he Paul Maurice, right?
Yes.
Where an established guy who new spot, lost his, I think, maybe not lost his passion for coaching, but was clearly done with Winnipeg, right? Which, again, maybe if they keep on flaming out in the first round, there's a reason why. Jesus Christ. I digress. But that is something you look at if you're trying to find optimism or what you hope could be accomplished by bringing in Sullivan, a guy that, is a seasoned veteran, has won before, leaves his own stamp on a team, has been through plenty of battles before, obviously with what he's done with Pittsburgh. And you hope that bringing him in with, the fact that you're hitting the ground running, you know what to expect. He's known as a accountable, pretty straightforward head coach who's been there before. Maybe just having that stability and that new voice is enough to kind of right the ship here and guys really buy in. I'm sure that Charlie McAvoy would have no problem buying in. If Charlie McAvoy is playing like he did in the Four Nations, he was a beast before he got hurt. So I think that's what you're hoping for if it is someone like Sullivan. And I think amongst that group, right, of the Sullivans, the Tortorellas, the Laviolettes, yeah, maybe you do get a little bit of a boost from any one of those guys who are cage rattlers who, ramp up the intensity. I think Sullivan offers the best chance, not a guarantee, but the best chance of being that kind of Paul Maurice. Hey, I'm really good at what I do. This is a new group. Let's build something here, and you guys are all going to buy in. And that's the results are what they are down in Florida. So I think if that's what you're looking at, that is what the Bruins would be banking on if they do decide to go for a guy like Sullivan.
100%. I want to get into why Sullivan might not choose the Bruins, why that's not exactly a layup. But first, our friends over at Game Time. Connor, it's almost summer. It's like late, it's mid-spring here. We're getting into May where it's really nice. Then we get to June, July, and August where the weather is awesome. And that means you want to go to games. You want to be outside. And that's what baseball games especially can provide. If you're here in Boston, it's Fenway. If you're in other markets, it's other stadiums. And those are awesome to go to as well. And you got to use our friends over at Game Time. Last minute deals. Connor, this is my favorite thing. Save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Connor, I'm someone who sometimes I'm not the best planner, and it's sort of, 75 degrees on a May night, and Red Sox are playing at Fenway, and I'm like, tickets are looking pretty good on Game Time. And I end up buying tickets like 30 minutes before. That's why Game Time is so great for me. There's also all-in pricing. You can toggle this feature to show the total up front with no surprise fees. At checkout, you get seat views, you get panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And there's Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Connor, what time is it?
Game time.
It is game time. It is game time. You know what else it is? It's a damn shame the Rangers moved on from Peter Laviolette, because that job seems a little more, what's the word, desirable for Mike Sullivan. Now, we don't know this. Again, Mike Sullivan could say, I want to take a year off. I want to travel the world. I want to do other things. I don't want to coach it. Maybe he's like, you know what? I want to start a podcast. Maybe he's like, I'm done with coaching. Who knows? But if he does coach again, which is the most likely option this upcoming season, Rangers are closer in contention. I believe him and Chris Drury both played at BU, not at the same time, but they were at
got those ties.
Got those ties. But I just go back to the contention thing. Like, Mike Sullivan's coming from a team who is headed for a rebuild. The Bruins aren't headed for a rebuild, but there is a little bit of a retool. They're picking in the lottery this year, high pick. The Rangers kind of seem to have the pieces. Like, the pieces should be there. It's just, can someone put it all together? He would make sense as someone who would put it all together. And that to me feels like the more desirable opportunity, at least on paper.
Yeah, I think they're probably the leader in the clubhouse right now. As you said, there's the ties with Drury, who, as much as every player was like, man, we hated what Chris Drury did, they gave him an extension, so he's sticking around. But yeah, he's got those ties there. I believe he was Tortorella's assistant when he was with the Rangers, so he has the ties. Just, you can look at the Bruins ties and they're evident, but he also has a lot with New York. And also there's, as you said, I think the Rangers at least have the pieces to be, there's a more valid case as to why they'll be back in the playoff mix next year as opposed to the Bruins, right? Like,
yes.
And also there's, I don't know what the right word is, like optics or distraction or anything like that. Like, maybe it's something where Mike Sullivan wants to, be closer to around here and goes and coaches the Rangers. But do you want to go back to the Bruins, a team you've been to, the added scrutiny on you and everyone else? Like, I wonder if that's something that we know what I'll leave it like this. I don't think the Bruins should have a problem with it. I don't think anyone else should really be fretting over Charlie McAvoy playing for his father-in-law. I really don't think it's that big of a deal. But like,
it's not like he's a sixth. It's not like he's a sixth defenseman, and Mike Sullivan's putting him as the top.
I don't think it's that big of a deal. But if Mike Sullivan's hired, we know what the discourse on sports radio would be. And so, like, do you want to deal with that discourse as well? Is it better just to go to a team like the Rangers? It's not like, it's Mike Sullivan's picking between the Bruins and the Seattle Kraken. Jesus Christ.
Another Kraken put down.
Yeah. Like there are other options out there. If he wants to go, Chicago is not a good team, right? But like, that is a team with history that maybe you want to coach that's on the up and up, or the Flyers, who have a younger core. Like, there's a lot of teams that have history that are in big markets that would make sense. It's not just it's Bruins or bust, or you want to coach an AHL team out west like Seattle. So, yeah, again, I think Bruins makes a lot of sense. I think the Bruins would ideally like to have him if that's what they're looking for as an established coach. I think he's far and away the best candidate there. It's just, for his perspective, there's a lot of other very valid destinations he could go to that I don't think anyone would begrudge him to pick the Rangers if that's what he's looking for.
That's why it is unfortunate for the Bruins this offseason, because Mike Sullivan would be the dream guy to get if you're the Bees. But you have all these other options. And I always go back to this. Like, you just mentioned Chris Drury. Chris Drury is just got an extension. Right or wrong, he just got an extension. He's there for a while.
Hysterical. Like, the
awesome.
replies on Twitter were hysterical when they announced that.
The replies were incredible. Sweeney's future past this season is uncertain at the moment. It's uncertain. He gets to hire that coach. He gets to make all these picks. He'll, be the GM next season. We don't know if he's going to be the GM past the season after, especially after Cam Neely's comments. If you're Mike Sullivan and you are the cream of the crop, you get to pretty much pick wherever you go. I assume his phone is already blowing up the second that news dropped on Monday morning. Are you going to pick the place with the GM whose future is uncertain? Like, I'm not saying that's the only thing, but let's say a new GM comes in next season who isn't, Evan Gold or someone that's already in the organization. And even if it wasn't their hire. We know this. GMs like to hire their own coaches. Not saying that if they hired Mike Sullivan this year and Don Sweeney was fired, then Evan Gold took over, or someone else took over, that they'd immediately fire Mike Sullivan. That'd be stupid. But the leash is a lot shorter. And suddenly, if you do start to stumble, well, he's not my guy. I'm bringing someone I want, who I picked. The Rangers don't have that problem. At least right now, they just signed their friggin' GM for a while. So that's another strike against them. But as we said, the ties are there. I do think Sullivan would get something new out of this roster. Sweeney mentioned wanting a guy with more of a defensive focus. Sullivan has that. A guy who can evolve offensively. This is Mike Sullivan, someone who Sidney Crosby swears by, who's won 2 cups with Crosby and Malkin, and aiding in the development of guys like Jake Gensel and guys like Connor Sheary, turning those guys into legit producers. So like, there's a lot there. Chris Letang. I read somewhere today, Chris Letang said he'd never play for another coach other than Mike Sullivan, I thought I saw. So, yeah, I mean,
Chris Letang retired. Chris Letang going to the Bruins.
Chris Letang to the Bruins right now. Petrov, make the meme. Yeah. Put his face on a Bruins jersey. So, I it makes a lot of sense. I just don't think you should get your hopes up, because I do think the Rangers are the biggest thing that's impeding the Bruins from getting Mike Sullivan. I'm sure we'll talk more about Mike Sullivan at some point, because there'll be more reports and things like that. One thing I think that we didn't talk a ton of last week, and we haven't talked a lot of, is Morgan Geekie. Morgan Geekie, hell of a season. Not just 7th player, but most improved. I think, consensus-wise. Most goals in a season, if it wasn't like Pasternak or like Marchand Wright, since like Phil Kessel in 08-09.
I believe that's true. Yeah.
At least according to Ty Anderson, who I assume isn't making that up.
Yes. Ty, if there's anyone that is going to, you're not going to fault Ty in terms of his stat keeping, especially after this hellish year. So
that notes app's got to be deleted, though. That notes app has.
I hope so. I hope for his sake.
Wiped. Oh, but he's up for a contract. He is an RFA. You wrote that he should get somewhere in the $5 to $6 million range this week. Sweeney mentioned last week that they want to lock him up on a long-term deal. I think everybody agrees it hopefully comes sometime before July 1, so then you can sort of have your cap space worked out. You don't get to arbitration. Where do you think it lands years and money-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating. I feel like we had the same conversation last year with Swayman, where, you can look at, which again, also one where I think, they're going to get this done before July 1st. You got to figure out how much money.
Yeah, I'm done saying a contract's going to be done before it is. I'm done with that.
But it's the same thing with Geeky, where it's tough to kind of, look at comparables when, one, this is a guy that had a breakout year. You have to figure, like, is that a flash in the pan? Is that shooting percentage going to dip? Is he only putting up those numbers because he's next to David Pastrnak? And I think if you keep him with Pastrnak, he could be a consistent 20, 25 goal scorer. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's a 30 goal guy. Maybe he's, again, the guy that I keep on mentioning is someone like Chris Kunitz, who you put him with a star player and the chemistry's there, you're going to get great value of a 50, 60 point guy there riding shotgun. And there's a lot of value to that. The Bruins at this point need like NHL level talent across the roster. So in terms of the value of Geeky, you have to keep him. It's just what that contract's going to be. So what is the price point for a guy that's having a breakout year, had 33 goals, right? So a clear impact player, but has only done it once. And then you factor in the state of the market where the cap's jumping up. Like, that's obviously going to skewer a lot of these deals moving forward. So what is the middle ground that both the Bruins and Geeky's representatives, come to terms to? Is it 6 years, $5 million? Is it more than $5 million? I think if it's like 6 and 30, you'd be thrilled. I think if it's $5 million, you take that and run with it for a guy that I think at the very least should be a 20 goal top 6 regular with Pastrnak. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm undershooting that. Maybe it's 6. Maybe it's 6.5. Like, what are they looking for? I think both sides want to do a long-term deal. And I think for a guy that, again, I don't think people realize is 26. And it's almost like, I know people talk a lot about, and this is probably a tangent, about offer sheeting Matthew Nyes. Like, Geeky's like 3 years older and is kind of the same profile as, like, goes to the net, has a good shot, and is also elevated by elite line mates. Like, it's kind of the same thing. I'd rather just like sign him than bring in Matthew Nyes and give up draft capital for him. But what that final contract is going to be, I'm very curious, because I don't have a barometer. I don't have a comparable to look at when you just look at the way the cap is jumping up this year.
I kind of have a comp. It'd be Brennan Hagel. Hagel with the Lightning, to me, seems like
90-point season incoming.
Hey, that's what I mean, man. Brandon Hagel, since this contract signed, has actually been really good. I remember when he had 64 points in 22-23 with the Lightning, and it came out of nowhere. That was a true breakout. He was with, I think, the Blackhawks before.
Blackhawks
He
drafted
didn't
by the Sabres. So
That's right. Another save. They just pollinate the rest of the NHL. But then signs this 8-year, $52 million contract, which comes to an AAV of 6.5 million. And everybody kind of goes, wait, what? That was after 64-point season. I think he had 75 last year and then had 90 this year. Again, 8 years times 6.5. Similar track record to Geeky. Geeky broke out this year. I don't think he hit 60 points exactly, but he did have 33 goals. I do wonder if they use this. And Geeky also has the added advantage of he can be a center. He can fit anywhere in the lineup. The cap is going up. That's why I do wonder. I'm not saying that they're not going to come to an agreement, but I agree with you in that I think he is, relatively speaking, worth around $5.5 million. I wonder if they go for 6.5. I wonder if they go for 7. Because, again, his shooting percentage is ridiculously high. So, like, I think I'm in your camp of, he's not going to be putting up 33 goals every single season. Maybe you do. Maybe he is Brandon Hagel. Maybe he is a 90-point guy, but likely not. And that's okay. So that's where that 5.5, 6 comes around. The Hagel thing makes sense. I wouldn't be shocked if they ask for 6.5 or more. Again, Geeky wants to be here. The Bruins want him here. Does he agree to a 7 or an 8-year deal and take less? Like, does he do that? And instead of making 6.5, he makes 6, or instead of making 6.25, he makes 6. I don't know, but I think Hagel might be the best comp for a guy like Geeky.
Yeah, and I think that's also just factoring in, even if he doesn't have the same trajectory of all of a sudden next year, he's a 70-point guy and builds off of it, which, like, I don't know. I'm saying, like, I think you have to expect a little bit of a dip because I think that's just the safe way to assess things. But I don't know. Like, maybe he is a 30-goal guy. Maybe he builds off of this. He's 26. Like, again, it's something, it's what he ends up being another couple of years down the road from now. I'm not really sure. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing, right? In terms of how you project what he could be. What he is at least an NHL caliber winger that plays well with David Pastrnak. So you have to sign him. But to your point, like, even if he doesn't have the same path as Hagel and he doesn't keep on building up and becomes like a legitimate, top 25 winger in the NHL, like Hagel, I think already is, that 6.5 probably falls in line with the fact that he signed that before the cap bumped up. So now, like, he's already probably steal Hagel. Hagel probably should be getting paid $8.5 million. So that also plays into it of that, I say $5 million, that's probably undershooting it right now because, I think you're seeing a lot of these players. It's going to be a lot of people having sticker shock this summer because if you thought like you didn't want to pay Jake DeBrusk $5 million, buddy, Jake DeBrusk's contract, honestly, relative to what his value is as a admittedly up and down but middle six player, he's got a pretty good deal from what guys are going to get paid now. Get ready to pay Brock Besser $8.5, $9 million this summer. Like, just the way the market's going to be now.
That's why I keep going back to, like, there are a lot of people who are like, don't get Marner, just get like Besser and Ehlers. And I'm like, do you know how expensive like both of those guys will be? And again,
maybe not Ehlers if Winnipeg bumps out again. But
That's right. But like with someone like Mitch Marner, and we go to this every single episode, and we will until free agency.
He signs somewhere else or just stays with Toronto.
Exactly. I go back to like, you're paying him a lot, but you're getting an ROI. You're getting return on investment. I'm not saying you're not going to get that with Besser, but the sticker shock's going to be crazy, right? If you give Mitch Marner $14 million, it's like, all right, well, that makes sense. Mitch Marner is a top 10 winger in the NHL, top 15 player in the league. Like that's a franchise cornerstone you've got. I'm not trying to knock down Brock Besser or anything like that, but if you're giving Besser $8 million, like it's a lot of money for a guy who might just put up 20, 25 goals.
Yeah, like 9.5 for 27 goals and 63 points, which is a good season. Like, oh, that's great. You need that. I'd rather pay $14 million for the guy that has 95 points and makes Casey Middlestat a 60-point player, or insert whoever else is on that wing with him.
Yes, and the other thing that you're seeing now in the NHL is there's just no middle class. There's no middle tier of guys making 4 or 5 million that like bump up a roster. It's entry level deals and high paid guys. And that's what the league is now. That's why you're seeing a lot of guys. I'm working on a story on this. That's why you're seeing a lot of guys from college leave early because teams are like, I'm just going to take a chance on, we'll take a chance on this guy, take a chance on that guy. Maybe they'll hit. And then we get them on the roster and they're making 800,000 and they're nothing against the cap. We're getting a lot of value. But yeah, back to Geeky. I think I wouldn't be shocked if he asks for a lot. And if there's going to be sticker shock with him, there are going to be people who think it's a bad idea. At the very least, he can play with elite talent. That's you take that. And if he is in that 5 to 6 million range, that is a middle tier guy in terms of today's cap. So it's not exactly like a ton of money. And I think that it should be worth it. One last thing before we go. Fleur Shinzawa of The Athletic wrote a dream scenario column over the weekend of what a dream offseason would be for the Bruins.
Is it Mitch Marner signing with the Bruins?
He did have Mitch Marner in there,
yes.
Which I was like, good. Yes, that is exactly the dream scenario. People not holding the Bruins' feet to the fire to get Mitch Marner, I think, are doing the wrong thing. But the number one thing was Bruins win the draft lottery, which I agree. I think we all agree 100%. If the Bruins would win the draft lottery, that's a pretty damn big thing. And he has them saying, he said, by going first in 2025, the Bruins set their sights on Matthew Schaefer, the do-it-all left-shot defenseman. He played only 17 games in 24-25 because of injuries, but it was enough to give the Bruins a look at a long-term top pair defender. Now, I must say, Connor, I'm not an expert on Matthew Schaefer. Admittedly, of all the top draft picks, he's the one I've done the least research on and watched the least amount of film because I don't think the Bruins are going to be in position to draft him, and I don't think they should draft a defenseman in the top 5. I think it should be a center. And that's exactly why. If they had the number one pick, would they take Schaefer? Like, I know Schaefer's good, but he's dealt with injuries. He dealt with injury this year. And Michael Misa's right there. Like, yeah. Maybe Schaefer is better, and maybe you do take the best guy available, but you so clearly need a franchise number one center. And of the centers in the top 5 that I've watched, Misa's the most like it.
Yeah, it's almost like if the Bruins do bump up, you're like, how about you just take 2? We're not asking Gary. We're not asking for 1. Like, come on, we're not being selfish here.
No,
like,
never.
San Jose's, you know what? They're building up the right way. Give them Schaefer, missing piece, and then we'll take Michael Misa, right? That makes a lot of sense. It is a really interesting argument because I think I agree with you, Evan, that like the most pressing need clearly is a center, and there's a lot to like about a guy like Michael Misa. Again, I have not done as much research on Schaefer as, all these other centers because, again, it's what the Bruins actually should be prioritizing. Schaefer's still supposed to be really damn good. Like, he's supposed to be the consensus one. Player. And so it's like, do you, if a guy like Schaefer, who people say is like Heiskanen and can be like a 50-point puck-moving stalwart for 10 years, is that too good to pass up on if the trajectory of Misa isn't as set in stone? Where I think Misa, I myself think Misa is like a top 6 centerman, like lock. Like, I think he's really damn good, but there is, I guess,
he has
maybe
almost
more,
like no weaknesses. Like it's
he
there's not a lot in his game that's bad.
He reminds me of, I think I probably said it on here, but he reminds me of like a souped up Braden Point. Like, just always offensively is like moving east-west, finding like shooting lanes, finding areas, like seems to always be in the right spots to make things happen, and is poised enough with the puck to capitalize on seams or anything like that. Like, he's a really good player. It's just, what has the higher upside? I don't think the Bruins would be tempted of like, oh, we need center, but like, we still got to look at the defense. I don't think it's like the identity politics of like the Bruins just got to build from the defense out, even if there's a lot to like about like Schaefer McAvoy for the next 10 years. Like, that is pretty damn good. But I still think like center is the more pressing need. And even if Misa ends up being more of a 60, 70 point guy, that's not ideal, but it's still what you kind of need down the middle is like a top 6 player. And so it's not like a lock. It's not set in stone, but I think where you look at what this team needs to do to elevate their ceiling, I think it has to do with talent down the middle as opposed to defense, as good as I think Schaefer is going to be.
100%. No, I completely agree. And Schaefer's a great player. Like, that's not my thing.
Yeah, I really like his game. Like, I don't think he's a Makar level type of impact like that, but I think he's like in his prime can be a 22, 23 minute puck moving 50-point power play quarter. Like he's really damn good. So it is not an easy conversation if you get to number one. If they get number one, our next pod is going to be like, fuck, because like because I really don't know. Like there's a very compelling argument as to what you want to do there, because I think we know what the best path for them is, but is also the best player, Schaefer. That is what you have to weigh, right?
Yeah, and again, if you have a chance to draft a legitimate number one defenseman, fuck.
we're gonna clip that when they get number one in the draft lottery. Just have like a 1 second clip of me doing that.
That's all you need. But like hypothetically, if you did have Schaefer and you had McAvoy and you have Hampus Lindholm, like you're beefed up back there, and you got Mason Lowry. Does that make Lowry more expendable? Right? Like then you start to question that. You got Zadorov back there, so like. You got Swayman in net. Do you build from the net out if you did have the number one pick? Because I don't think there's any world in which you trick the Sharks into believing like you're going to take Schaefer. I guess you could start putting that out there. So then, because like they need a number one defenseman, right? Like the Sharks. If there's any team who needs Schaefer, it's the Sharks. There's not even a question.
Yes.
And could you put enough out there to make Mike Greer and the Sharks get scared and say, well, we'll give you the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick, and we'll also give you,
Macklin Celebrini,
Will Smith. We'll give you everybody. Like, maybe you try to do that, but if the Bruins got the number 1 pick, I would have a tough time thinking they're not taking Misa, just given what they need. But it comes down to, do they think that Schaefer's way better? If they think Schaefer's way better, they're taking Schaefer. You're not taking you're like, it's sort of like, this isn't other sport, but like was it 2017 when the Celtics had the 1, they traded back and took Tatum at 3 because they knew that he wasn't going to be taken it by either of the other 2 teams at 1. So you got to consider that as well. But I'd have a tough time believing they wouldn't take Misa.
And I also think like some of that projections has changed a little bit too, and I'm sure it's going to change even more until we get to the end of June, right? Where like I think obviously it was Hagen's friend Jimmy Hagen's like leading the way, and then I think from December on, it's been like, oh, Schaefer's a lock. But I think now, even though I think a lot of people still have Schaefer as 1, people are like, Misa's really damn good. He went far and beyond what we thought he was going to do this year in the OHL. So maybe if like the gap really isn't that far between those 2 players, I don't think anyone would also be like a gasp if like the Bruins had 1 and they took Misa, because I think he's really kind of narrowed that gap a little bit between him and Schaefer.
Well, that's the thing. If you have the number 1 pick, it's hard to pass over the best player available in the draft. I mean, that's can be malpractice. If they believe Schaefer's that much better, you have to take Schaefer.
Yeah, if you have number 1 and you take like Roger McQueen, you let Schaefer and Misa go, then you can actually go fuck.
Exactly. But exactly. Yeah, no, I think that honestly, the way from what I've seen so far, if they have a pick in the top 5, which we think that they will, at least they should. I'm not saying you can't go wrong with any of the centers, but you're likely getting a guy who you hope is a franchise center. And I think that's a big piece. It's not as high end as 2023. And you don't have, Celebrini at the top of the draft like you did last year, but I do think you have, top 6 or future top 6 centers in that top 5, which you hope to get with Desnoyers and Frindell and Hagens, and obviously Misa at the top. So we'll see. And we will continue to have more coverage. Obviously, Bruins Beat. We have Poke the Bear. There's Pucks with Haggs. Make sure to subscribe to Bruins Ringside on YouTube if you're not already. Turn the notifications on so you know when we go live. We will be doing live streams at different points, probably for the draft. If any big news happens, we will certainly be going live. And then also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure to subscribe to us there. All 3 of the podcasts. And yeah, that's this week's episode. Connor, what can the people look forward to from you over the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at the Globe and Boston.com. We're going to be covered every step of the way this offseason, from free agency, trades, roster breakdowns, maybe looking at some Providence. They're moving on, playing Charlotte, I believe. So might try to get over to a game, I think, at some point this week as well, to check out how they're doing. Actually have some playoff hockey to look forward to, but we'll have you covered every step of the way. So please read all my stuff over on those 2 sites. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. You can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.